By the end of this video, you're going to know how geniuses like Thomas Edison, Albert Einstein, and Alan Turing came up with their genius ideas. I'm going to tell you the story of how I learned to think like a genius and explain exactly how you can too. So I'm going to break the video up into these 5 sections. Section 1, I'm going to teach you exactly how your mind breaks things apart. That process is called differentiation. Part 2, I'm going to teach you how your mind stores information and adds basically a positive or negative value to different pieces of stored information, which is completely blocking you from actually coming up with these genius ideas. Part 3, I'm going to teach you the 3 different types of differentiation in the 3 worlds: the social world, the inner world, and the outer world. And part 4, I'm going to teach you exactly how to think like a genius now that you've got the basics of how your mind actually works. And part 5 is a bonus to teach you how these ideas can actually get you rich by explaining how when you bring new ideas back to the collective, it can be extremely rewarding. So stick around for part 5. And with that out of the way, let's get started. Part 1, how your mind breaks things apart. Now this process is called differentiation, and in order to show you exactly what this means and how it works, let's jump straight into 3 specific examples. I believe that's actually the best way to learn new concepts. So, bread. You're standing at home and you see a loaf of bread on the counter. Now imagine this is before you actually ever knew what bread was. Like imagine you were 300 years ago and it's the first loaf of bread that you've ever seen, right? What do you think, right? You just see an object. You don't know what it is. It's just one thing. All you can do is you can see it, maybe you can smell it and it smells good, and maybe you feel hungry and you want to eat it. But the actual object of bread, you still don't know what it is, right? So what can you do? You can take a bite out of it, you can look at it, you can touch it. You're going to learn little things about it, but not what it really is. So now let's look at it from a different angle. Imagine you actually saw somebody make bread and you saw them put yeast, flour, and water together, mix it up, let it sit, and then cook it, and you see it rise. Now you know what bread actually is. And the next time you see bread, you're not just going to see one loaf of something that you have no idea what it is. You're going to see these 3 things, these 3 objects: yeast, flour, and water. Right, that one thing has now been broken up into 3 different things. So anytime you encounter bread again in the world, you're going to understand, okay, it's made from yeast, flour, and water, and now I actually know what that thing is. That's differentiation. You've taken one thing, right, and broken it up into its parts. Now you understand it more, okay? So let's look at example number 2. And this is actually where I first learned the process of differentiation. So my brother and I just moved into a brand new small apartment. It was a pretty bad apartment, but we invited our friend Alex to come over. And before he came over, right, before he'd ever been to our apartment, he had never seen it. He'd never seen photos. He'd only heard a little bit about it. So when he thinks about the new apartment in his mind, it's like an idea. It's like a shadow, a silhouette of an idea. And he has like guesses. He can have guesses. Like he'll think, you know, oh, is it going to be dirty? Is it going to be beautiful? Is it going to be well decorated? Is it going to be big? Is it going to be small? Right? He has all these different ideas. He has no idea what the apartment is going to be like, but he has an idea. It's like this. It's like a box with a question in it. What actually is it? Right? Now the second that he steps into the apartment, now he sees everything. Okay. Now Daniel and my brother's name is John. Now Daniel and John's apartment is no longer this shrouded idea. It's been differentiated. It's been broken up. Okay, you know, there's a couch. There's a kitchen in the corner, right? There's a couch here. There's a desk here. You know, there's another table here for eating. It's been broken down into its parts and differentiated. So that's an example of how I basically learned how to think like a genius. So that's the beginnings of it. This is the first idea you need to understand, is how your mind actually breaks things down into its different parts. And then the next thing is how it stores them and categorizes them. That's part 2. But for now, let's move on to example number 3. In example number 3, imagine that you're living with your family or whatever, and a new neighbor moves in next door. Now, you don't know this person, you don't know their name, you don't know anything about them. Maybe you haven't even seen them either. You just know that they've moved in. You're going to have an idea, right, like what they are. Same as the loaf of bread and same as the apartment. It's like, you know what it is. It's just, okay, it's an apartment, or it's a loaf of bread. I've seen it for the first time. Same as a neighbor or any new person that you meet. They're just a new object that you haven't broken down into its different parts yet. So before you meet this neighbor, you have no idea who they are, what type of person they are, if they're going to improve your life or make it worse. None of that stuff yet. You haven't differentiated this new person that's kind of moved into your life. Now, after you speak to them, straight away you're going to know, their name, where they came from. You'll have a conversation with them and feel, whether you like them or not. And you've just immediately broken down this new person into its three parts, or into its multiple parts, whatever these things are. A feeling, you shake their hand, they have a rough hand, they've worked in lumber, their name's Greg, right? Now it's no longer such a big unknown. Now you know this guy's name's Greg, he lives next door, he's got a family of 3, blah, blah, blah. So that's the process of differentiation, how your mind breaks things apart. Next, let's move straight on to the introjection process and how your mind actually stores this information. Part 2, how your mind stores information. And this process is called introjection. When you discover something new in the world and your mind stores this new piece of information. So with our first example with the bread, when you learn what something is, you're going to unconsciously basically categorize it in your mind as either positive or negative. So if we look at our example of bread, when you first see the bread, you're immediately going to think, do I like this or do I not like this? Just from looking at it. And the way you'll make that decision is using your 4 conscious functions. These are sensation, intuition, feeling, and thinking. I won't go too much in depth about those 4 functions in this video, but what I am going to explain to you is the most important one for thinking like a genius. And that's feeling. When you first see that bread, you don't know what it is, but you have to decide whether you like it or not, or whether it's a good thing or not. And how do you do that? First of all, you use sensation. So you're going to see it, you're going to go over to it, maybe pick it up, touch it, you're going to bite into it, which means you're going to taste it, and you might hear a crunch, and you'll also smell the smell of the hot bread. All of these 5 things are your 5 senses, and that's one of your conscious functions in your mind. All of these 5 senses are little pieces of information that go into your mind, right? And then you make your decision using your feeling. And feeling is basically the positive or negative response that you have to something, which tells you whether to accept it or reject it. So in this case, especially if you're eating something, you are literally accepting it into your body. So bread, you're going to have a positive feeling for bread. Okay. Number 2 is the new apartment. Alex, when he first walked into that new apartment, he may have been disgusted. It may have been messy. It may have smelled really bad. He may have felt sick while he was walking through, right? In that case, he's going to have a negative feeling response, right? Let's just say, don't worry, my apartment wasn't that messy. It was actually pretty clean and nice. If it were like that, then he would have a negative feeling response towards that apartment. And when he stores that information in his mind, those feelings are going to come back up. The senses are going to come back up into his mind. Okay. Now, the last one we're going to look at is Greg. So before you knew Greg, you just didn't know whether you liked him or not, whether he was going to be a good person in your life and help your life or make it worse. After talking to him, he's got 3 kids, they're all nice. He seems like a nice guy. He's got a nice smile. And you decide that you like him. So now when you think of Greg, you store the information associated with Greg with a positive feeling tone, right? Whether you accepted him, you like him, right? So these are just 3 examples, and we've only looked at feeling and sensation for now because those are what are most important for actually learning how to think like a genius. So let's just move on straight on to part 3 and go into the 3 worlds. Part 3, what are the 3 different types of differentiation? So the first one is the outer world. That's the world of objects, the material world. When you see things around you, that's the outer world. Part 2 is the inner world. So this is, if you just close your eyes, now you're in your mind. Now you're in your inner world. The world of feelings and thoughts, intuitions, ideas, fantasies, dreams. This is inside your mind, and that's your inner world. Part 3 is the social world. I say part, but what I actually think of these in my own mind is the 3 realms. The 3 realms or the 3 worlds. Basically the 3 different parts of reality that basically categorize all things. So number 3 is the social world. This is the world of other people and relationships. So just a way to instantly test and understand these 3 worlds is to just imagine yourself sitting around a campfire with a bunch of other people. imagine this was 20,000 years ago and you're in a primitive tribe. So the first thing is you just look around you and you can see the fire, the trees, anything physical. And that's the outer world, right? Now imagine that you look to the person next to you and it's the tribal elder and they're singing a song. Right, now you're in the world of relationships because you're looking at another person, interacting with them. Even just by looking at them and seeing them, you're interacting with them because they mean something to you. They're the leader of the group, or they're the elder who has wisdom and guidance for the group. And the final one is the inner world. So if you imagine sitting around that campfire and just closing your eyes, now you're in your mind. Now you open your eyes and look at the tribal elder. Now you're in the social world. And then you look at the rest of the world around you, you're in the outer world. So you're in all these three worlds all the time, all at once. And when you're going through this differentiation process in your own life, you differentiate in each of the different worlds. So you may differentiate, what's a whiteboard? Okay, it's made out of plastic, it's this, it's that. Now the inner world, you may have a thought that you haven't quite figured out yet, or a fantasy, like maybe a fantasy is all mixed up with these feelings and thoughts about going to university or going on a trip overseas when you have no money, something crazy, right? And it's all bundled up and you can't really figure it out, right? That's when you can pull it all apart and you can say, okay, I have this feeling because of this reason, this thought is because of this. My fantasy is, you trace it back and you figure out why you're having that fantasy. That's how you differentiate the inner world. And finally, the social world, well, you know that it's just when you learn more about another person and their meaning changes to you. Because, we have the phrase, when you get to know somebody, when you first meet somebody, you just kind of meet their mask that they show the world. You don't really get to know who that person really is. So when you differentiate who they really are, learn more about them, their personality, their history, whatever, who they are, that's when you differentiate in the social realm. So now that that's all complete, we can finally move on to part 4, how to think like a genius using everything we've learned from part 1, 2, and 3. Let's get right into it. Okay, let's jump right into part 4, how to actually think like a genius. So we have over here Jimmy, and he's going to be our example number 1, and Einstein, who's going to be our example number 2. So Jimmy is going to be our example of how to not think like a genius, and Einstein's going to show us how to think like a genius. So let's just imagine that both of these two individuals are presented with an idea. So let's just go back to our example with bread. So we've never seen bread before. Neither of these two people have ever seen bread before. They see it for the first time, then they differentiate it. And we're back to step 1. They see somebody make it and explain to them that bread has 3 parts: yeast, water, and flour. Okay? Then they use their 4 functions. So they use their sensation to taste it, etc., like we talked about, and they decide that bread is good. It's nutritious, it's filling, it feels good, it smells good, it tastes good. Jimmy likes bread. Great. Einstein comes to the same conclusions. He likes bread too. Okay? Now, let's just say that Jimmy and Einstein are going about their lives, and Jimmy meets somebody, and that person says to Jimmy, "Did you know that bread is poisonous?" Now, Jimmy is not a genius, and he's going to remember his experience with bread being positive, and he liked bread, and he was told that bread is good from somebody else. He's differentiated bread, right? And he now believes bread is this. And this idea doesn't fit into his understanding of reality. When this new person comes along and says, "Hey, Jimmy, did you know that bread is poison?" Jimmy's reaction is going to be like, "No, it's not." He's going to immediately reject it. He's going to reject that idea just flat, just without even any consideration. And he's not going to do it consciously. Like, we're talking about it now, and it's because we're talking about the idea, it's easy to say, "Oh, yeah, no, I wouldn't reject it like that." But if your friend came up to you tomorrow and told you, "Hey, did you know that vegetables are terrible for you and you should never eat them again?" Or, "Did you know that you should never eat meat again?" Or, "Did you know that every day when you wake up, you should flick your eyelids 5 times because it makes you see better?" Right? If they tell you these things that don't fit into your understanding of the world, into your conception of reality, into your differentiated version of reality, right? Then you just reject it flat out. Jimmy's going to say, no, it's not. He's going to laugh. He's going to say, you're an idiot to whoever told him this. And then he's just going to go on with his day and never think about it again. That's Jimmy. Now, let's just say Einstein. And I say Einstein just to demonstrate that he is, this is the way to think like a genius. So this is just immediate rejecting of new ideas which don't fit into your conception of reality. And here is how to think like a genius. So somebody says to Einstein, hey, did you know that bread is poison? So what does Einstein do? He goes, I never thought about bread being poison. Let me explore that new path. Let me see where it takes me. And so he develops a new idea. Okay, how could bread be poison? What I know is that it's made of these 3 ingredients. Maybe one of them could be toxic to the human body. Okay, that's idea number 1. Then you chain these ideas together, right? And you think down this new path that doesn't fit into anyone's conception of reality, let alone your own. And the only way to do this, it's very difficult to just not reject ideas outright, especially the ones that are insane, don't make sense, or are like tabooed or evil, like that you shouldn't think based on whatever reasons. And so you chain these ideas together and you might land upon something interesting. Okay, it's got yeast, it's got flour, it's got water. Oh wow, what else is in it? What else can I learn about it? Okay, look under a microscope, it's got gluten. Okay, wait, maybe gluten is poison for some people. Boom, now you've hit on a new idea and you've discovered something new about reality, which is true. You just didn't know how. You just didn't know why. You didn't know if it was true or not. But you had the courage to at least explore the idea. And this is where you can really discover so many new genius ideas. That's how to think like a genius, right? Think about Einstein's journey. He was thinking down a new path, which nobody in human history had ever thought down that path before. That's how to think like a genius, because you have to think, this is all of human knowledge inside here. This is everything we know. Okay, a little light bulb. Inside this bubble is every single idea, every single thought that any human has ever had up until this moment. Now, you most likely, even me, have only had thoughts inside this bubble, not something completely brand new. We haven't come up with some new genius idea or some, discovered something new about reality, which is profound and interesting. And the reason why is because it's so hard to think outside of this bubble. I'm going to give an example that's going to be a really good demonstration. Well, I'm not sure where it's going to take us. But first of all, I'll just explain the 4 conscious functions of your mind. So sensation tells you that something is there. Thinking tells you what that thing is. Feeling tells you whether to accept or to reject that thing, whether it's agreeable or not. And intuition is your gut feelings or your hunches that you have. So those are your 4 functions. Those are the basic definitions of those 4 functions. Now, when you're learning to think like a genius, you can learn to develop these functions, because in most people, including myself and including anyone, you have what's called a dominant function. So just like you might be right-handed or left-handed, you use one of these functions more than the others. And so as an example of how to think like a genius, let's do something interesting. So one of the parts of sensation for your conscious mind is your 5 senses, right? And one of those 5 senses is taste. So, have you ever tasted a whiteboard marker, right? I haven't before, now I have. It gets me thinking. It tastes like, paper and ink. Okay, that's, the initial piece of information was the taste of the marker. Now, boom. Next thing, it makes me think about paper and ink. Now it makes me think about, newspapers and newspaper printing presses. Okay, and now it makes me think about, okay, why have they gone out of date? Okay, boom. Now it makes me think about, okay, how can I bring them back? I don't know. Then I think about the movie The Book of Eli, because there's a printing press in that movie. Then I think about how printing presses made people famous and made people millions of dollars because they allowed people to read words, the same words of books around the world. Okay, that's the next idea. Blah, blah, blah. In this instance, with this example of the taste of, look, another something else came to my mind just now. It tastes like one of those Listerine strips that you can put in your mouth that tastes minty. That's that. And then that makes me think of, can I do the same material on the top of a wedding cake and put a famous painting on there? And then, that's still edible. And would it not disintegrate? Blah, blah, blah. Right now, boom. You see this chain of ideas? This is how you think like a genius. Because, some of those things I said were just ludicrous, stupid, they didn't make sense. It's just nonsense when you take it at face value. But then you might land on something that's not nonsense. Something here might be actually useful, actually interesting. Or it might lead you to another idea outside here. And then you follow this chain, and then you land on something valuable. And that's how to think like a genius, is to just not reject these ideas that come into your mind or come into your life, right, from something else. Somebody tells you these ideas, right? Don't reject them and just see where they take you. You don't have to accept them. You don't have to use them. You can just think about it for 1 minute and then never think about it again. You don't have to, immediately change your understanding of reality based on one idea. But if you do pursue crazy, stupid, nonsensical ideas, chain them together, see where they lead you. That's how Einstein figured out his theory of relativity. Years and years of discovering one little bit of the next piece of the puzzle, one little bit of the next piece of the puzzle. And that's over years. His chain of ideas, the nexus, when the first chain that he ever experienced, was like a little seed, and then it just grew a little bit. And that's how you end up on these huge ideas that can get you rich. And that's what we're going to talk about in part 5. So another thing I will mention is that if you're interested in learning how to develop your 4 functions, and there's both an extroverted and introverted version of each of these 4 functions, I've put together a course called the 7-Day Decision Maker, and I'll just put the link in the bio. So yeah, if you're interested in learning how to make decisions using all your 4 functions, because normally most people, not normally, 99% of people only develop 1 to 2 of these functions in their life. For example, I'm a dominant thinking function individual, and they never really develop these other functions. And that can lead you to making really bad decisions in your life, because some decisions require multiple of these functions in order to make a good decision. For example, if you're in a boxing match, you're not going to be able to win really based on your feeling and not using sensation. And if you're at a funeral, in order to make decisions about who to talk to and what to say, you're going to need your feeling, and maybe thinking can lead you down the wrong path and cause issues. So anyway, I've put together a course called the 7-Day Decision Maker, and if you want to check it out, the link's in the bio. And with that, let's move on to step 5, which is how to get rich from these ideas that you generate from thinking like a genius. Let's move on to step 5. Okay, this is part 5, the bonus, where I'm going to teach you how to get rich from these new ideas. So if you imagine that this circle represents all of human knowledge up until this point, so everything that any human being has ever discovered, any idea, any thought, any new information about the environment that they've differentiated, that's what this circle represents. And you are currently inside that circle. You haven't thought of some new thing that no one's ever thought of before. You haven't so far gone outside that circle. Let's just dial it back, let's just say 10,000 years ago, and imagine that you're in a village with 100 people, and those 100 people are around you, and this dotted line represents the collective human knowledge acquired up until that point of that village. So everybody, when you grow up, everybody around you is teaching you different things. The same process is happening now, but it's just easier to explain with this example of the village. So when you grow up, your parents are going to teach you things, the tribal elders are going to teach you things, you're going to be taught values and ideas, and that makes up everything that you understand about reality. Your concept of what's true, what exists, what is reality. And the same ideas are in everyone else's mind. That's why you're inside this bubble. Now, when you do what we discussed in part 4, which is thinking like a genius, and you chain these ideas together and you think down pathways that are not conventional and that don't make sense, and you suppress, or you pause that feeling to just reject new ideas that don't make sense or are crazy straight away. then you think like a genius because you're leaving this bubble. If you're in the village and you have an idea, you think down a new pathway that no one's ever thought down before, okay? You leave the collective. The collective means just everybody else, basically, in that society. So you leave the village, okay? You think like a genius, you stop rejecting ideas, consider these new ideas, think down these new pathways, and you come up with some new thing, some brilliant idea. What happens when you start to think down these new pathways is that you're thinking differently to everybody else, and the concept of reality inside these people's minds becomes different to yours. And with any kind of genius, whether it's Albert Einstein, Thomas Edison, Alan Turing, when you develop new ideas, you get immediately vilified. These people who are in the collective, they don't like you because what you're forcing them to do when you come up with some new idea, right? It's a light bulb for your idea. When you think down these new pathways like a genius and come up with something new that no one has ever thought of in here, in the whole of human knowledge and history and time, no one's thought of this idea. What you're forcing these people to do is change their entire perception of reality, okay? Everyone thinks that things work the way they work, and then you're going to come in here and, tear the ground out from under their feet. These people are standing on solid ground. They believe that 10,000 years ago, the belief is some mythology of how things happened, how the mountain was formed. You're going to come in there and tell them it's something different. Now their entire understanding of reality has been shifted and shattered. They were standing on solid ground, and now because of you, they're standing on quicksand, right? So, when you do think down these new pathways and go against conventional values and think down, you have to think down evil and disgusting pathways to find genius ideas, okay, that no one else has thought of before. Because these people, it's not even that they're not willing to, it's that they can't, because they just so automatically reject any new idea that's put in their path. So anyway, how to get rich. When you do come up with this new idea or this piece of information that no one has ever discovered before in human history, the initial reaction from everybody is that they hate you, okay? They don't want to change, they don't want their life to change. But then, once you go outside and you follow through with your idea and execute it, then bring it back to the collective, the result is that their attitude is going to change, most likely. Or at least over time it will. Let's just take an example like the guy who invented the whiteboard and the whiteboard marker. That idea, at one point in time, these didn't exist, whiteboards never existed, but first they existed in some guy's mind. He had the idea, he thought down a new pathway. There's chalkboards and there's chalk. Okay, how can I make it better, right? How can I innovate here? He probably these ideas never come up in some logical, simple way like what I'm saying, where he's like, let me think about this problem and solve it. He probably just pieced together all these ideas over time. It was building in his mind, and he was open to it. And that's how he was able to not only come up with it, but then also follow through on how to actually create it and bring it to fruition. But you can imagine that if there's like some 60-year-old professor who's been using chalkboards in his teaching in his classrooms for 40 years, and some guy comes up and says, hey, here's a whiteboard marker and a whiteboard, he's not going to be happy, and he's not going to just say, oh yeah, great, let me just throw out my chalkboard and my chalk. I want to use the whiteboard now. No, the reaction from the collective to new ideas, initially, it's pretty much always just negative, and that's just normal. So it's your job to then follow through on these ideas, and bring them back to the collective to improve their life, right? And so the example going back to the tribe is like you leave the village, okay, and you come back with a herb that no one's ever heard of before from a distant land. Okay, and the herb it has healing properties, it tastes good in soup. But when you first come back, they don't want to change all their recipes and all their traditional things with this thing from some distant land. They don't, just because you found it. But then when you bring it back and someone gets sick and then the herb fixes it, then the person, one person changes, and then it's just a domino effect. One person likes it and integrates it, and then it's the chain reaction, and then eventually the collective integrates this new quality, this new thing. Whatever, 100 years ago, whiteboards weren't around. Now they're everywhere. It's not something that you even question or think about. It's just, oh, it's a whiteboard, whatever. But you know, at some point it wasn't that way. And so this process is happening all the time, and there's no reason why you can't come up with the next, you know, $1 million idea. Like, you know, it's a cliche thing to say, but the way to actually come up with new ideas is to think like a genius, like we said in step 4, to consider these ideas which are horrible, stupid, nonsense, connect them to new ideas and see where it takes you. And with that, that's the end of the video. So I hope you've enjoyed. I'll be posting new videos every single day. So if you like this video and want to watch more, just click that subscribe button. And also, if you're interested in learning more about your 4 functions, the 4 functions of your mind, and how to develop them to make better decisions and also find your personal destiny, just check out the link in the description and also the pinned comments for the 7-day decision maker. See you in tomorrow's video.